It started like any ordinary day in this quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Birds were chirping, kids were riding their bikes, and families were going about their routines. The kind of day where nothing out of the ordinary happens, where everything feels calm and predictable. But by nightfall, everything would change. Something would shatter that peace, something wild, something completely unexpected. At 6:43 p.m., the Wilson family's security system was triggered. The footage it recorded was nothing like the usual alerts they received. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a burglar. What appeared on their camera was far more extraordinary: a full-grown, wild mountain gorilla. Neighbors heard the sound of glass shattering, followed by an eerie, low grunt that echoed across the neighborhood. Panic began to ripple through the area as people peered cautiously through their windows, trying to make sense of what was happening. Emergency services were immediately flooded with calls, and animal control was sent to the scene. But before anyone could even respond, the gorilla had already made its way inside the house. And here's the twist. It wasn't there to steal anything. It wasn't there to cause destruction or chaos. It was there for her. Lila had always felt a connection to the wild, even before moving to the United States. Growing up in the Congo Basin, she was surrounded by nature, where her parents worked as wildlife conservationists. Her mother studied endangered species, and her father helped run a rescue center for animals in need. From the moment Lila could walk, she was immersed in the world of wildlife. As a toddler, she would wander the sanctuary, holding the hands of baby elephants or feeding orphaned gorillas, just like she was part of the forest herself. The gorillas were always her favorites. She could spend hours sitting quietly among them, watching them play, interact, and even care for each other as a family. But one gorilla, in particular, stood out: Batu, a baby gorilla that had been found abandoned and injured. Batu had been brought to the sanctuary just as Lila was learning to talk. The two grew up together. Lila was just 5 years old when she first met Batu. She would sit with him every day, feeding him fruit, rubbing his back, and playing with him in the quiet, shaded areas of the sanctuary. Batu was curious, playful, and affectionate, traits that were rare in a wild animal, but made him more like a brother to Lila than a gorilla. The bond between them was undeniable. Batu would always find her, no matter where she was in the sanctuary. He would approach her, gently hold her hand, and follow her around. It wasn't just a connection through food or routine. It was something deeper, something Lila couldn't explain. When her family moved to the United States, it was hard for Lila to leave the sanctuary behind. She missed the gorillas, especially Batu. But she always believed that their bond was special, that one day she might see him again. What she didn't expect was for that day to come so soon and in such a shocking way. The day of the break-in started like any other. Lila and her family went about their usual afternoon routine. She was in her room, reading, while her parents were downstairs working. Outside, the weather was calm. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. But then, around 6:30 p.m., Lila heard a loud crash coming from downstairs. It was the kind of noise that made her stop mid-sentence in her book. She rushed to the top of the stairs, peeking over the banister, unsure of what was happening. Her parents were already on the move, but they didn't seem to know what was going on either. Moments later, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the house. Lila's heart raced as she heard her mom whispering frantically into the phone, calling 911. "There's an animal in the house," she said, her voice shaking. Lila's father moved quickly to lock the back door, but it was too late. The security camera in the living room caught the moment that would change everything. The camera showed a massive figure emerging from the backyard, huge, dark, and unmistakable. A wild gorilla, its eyes scanning the area, its movements deliberate but not frantic. The family had no idea how it had gotten there. The gorilla had somehow broken through the backyard gate and forced its way inside. It wasn't running, wasn't attacking. It was simply walking through the house as if it had every right to be there. Lila's mom whispered, "Get into the basement, now." The family quickly gathered together, rushing to the basement door as quietly as possible. They huddled together in the dark, listening to the sounds coming from upstairs. Outside, they could hear police sirens in the distance. But inside, it was just silence, broken only by the occasional sound of the gorilla's heavy steps. It moved calmly, exploring the house, sniffing around as if trying to figure out where it was. As the seconds ticked by, Lila's thoughts raced. Why was it here? What did it want? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The tension was unbearable. But even then, one thing was clear. The gorilla wasn't acting aggressively. It wasn't here to destroy the house or harm anyone. It was here for something, or someone. And the Wilson family would soon discover who that was. As the gorilla wandered the house, Lila's family remained frozen in the basement, barely daring to breathe. The sounds of the gorilla's footsteps above them were heavy, slow, almost deliberate. There was an odd calmness in the way it moved, no signs of aggression or chaos, just the sound of a wild animal in an unfamiliar space. Lila pressed her ear against the basement door, trying to make sense of what was happening. The gorilla had entered their home through the back door, but it wasn't like the break-ins she'd heard about on the news. It didn't sound like it was searching for food or wrecking everything in its path. It just moved through the house. Then, as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, something unexpected happened. The gorilla, after roaming through the living room and kitchen, suddenly stopped at the foot of the stairs. It seemed to pause for a moment. A long pause. Then, slowly, it turned its head, peering up the stairs. Lila's heart skipped a beat. The gorilla was looking directly at her room. Lila didn't know what compelled her to act, but she found herself moving. She crept toward the basement door, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't just stay hidden forever. There had to be a reason why the gorilla had come here. And somehow, she felt like she was part of that reason. Her mother tried to stop her, whispering, "Lila, no, don't go out there." But it was already too late. Lila had opened the door. Upstairs, the gorilla was standing at the bottom of the staircase, its large eyes scanning the space. For a moment, it looked uncertain, but when it saw Lila standing there, it didn't charge or growl. Instead, it stood still, its gaze locking onto hers. The air seemed to go still. A strange, silent connection passed between them, one that neither of them could ignore. Lila took a tentative step forward, and the gorilla didn't back away. It actually took a step toward her, slowly, with calm but focused eyes. Lila's heart raced as she stood there, not moving, not sure what was going to happen next. But one thing was clear. The gorilla recognized her. Batu, the baby gorilla she had cared for years ago, was now standing in front of her. It had to be him. Lila's mind raced with the realization. Batu had remembered her. Despite everything that had happened, despite the years and the distance, the bond they had shared was still alive in his memory. The gorilla took another step forward, gently holding out one massive hand. Lila, with trembling hands, reached out and placed her palm against his. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear as the two of them shared an unspoken understanding. A reunion neither of them had expected. This was no wild animal just searching for food. This was Batu, the gorilla who had known her, and had come all this way to find her. Lila stood frozen, her hand gently resting against Batu's massive, rough palm. The air between them felt charged, as if the entire room was holding its breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. The gorilla's large brown eyes remained locked on hers, as if trying to make sense of the strange reunion. And Lila? She felt like she was dreaming, like everything she had known about gorillas and their behavior was being turned upside down. She could hear her parents whispering in disbelief from behind the basement door, still too afraid to approach. But Lila didn't care. She couldn't look away from Batu. Despite the danger, despite the fear that she should be feeling, all she felt was an overwhelming rush of emotions, nostalgia, surprise, and a deep sense of connection that she had never expected to feel again. The gorilla stepped closer, his enormous body moving with surprising gentleness. He leaned his head down, nuzzling the air around Lila's shoulder, his breath warm and familiar. For a split second, she thought she could hear a low, soft grunt, like a greeting, like he was saying her name. It was an unbelievable moment, one that felt suspended in time. Batu had remembered her, recognized her despite everything. The years, the distance, the change. He had come all this way, broken into a house, simply to find her. Lila slowly knelt down in front of him, trying to calm her racing heart. She whispered almost to herself, "Batu, it's really you, isn't it?" The gorilla gave a soft grunt in response, his eyes still filled with an almost human-like recognition. Lila couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She reached out and touched his fur, feeling the rough texture of his coat, the same way she had when she was younger, back at the sanctuary in Congo. This was the same gorilla she had fed, played with, and cared for. And now, here he was, standing in front of her, remembering her after all this time. For the next few minutes, Lila and Batu stayed together in silence. It wasn't the reunion anyone would have expected. No shouting, no excitement, just two old friends in a quiet, peaceful understanding. Lila stroked Batu's arm gently, her tears falling freely. She didn't know how or why this had happened, but she knew one thing for sure. This moment was like no other. Outside, the sirens of animal control and the police grew louder, but Lila wasn't afraid anymore. Batu wasn't a threat. He wasn't dangerous. He was just a gorilla who had come to find the one person he remembered, the one person who had shown him kindness. As time passed, the animal control officers arrived and carefully approached the situation. They were stunned by what they saw, how calm and gentle Batu was with Lila, how there was no aggression, no signs of fear. He was, after all, just an animal who had remembered love. Lila slowly stood up, her heart still racing, but now with a deep sense of peace. She knew Batu would be taken care of, that he would be returned to a sanctuary where he could live out his life safely. But for now, all that mattered was that for a brief moment, the wild world of Congo and her world here had collided in a way that nobody could ever explain. It was a bond that no distance or time could break. The news of the gorilla's break-in quickly spread beyond Lila's neighborhood. What started as a local story soon went viral, with headlines popping up on every news outlet and social media platform. "Wild gorilla breaks into house," they read. "Unbelievable reunion with girl who raised him." Lila's phone started buzzing nonstop with messages from friends, family, and even people she didn't know. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone was talking about it. But what really shocked the world was the story behind it. People couldn't believe that a wild gorilla, after escaping from a nearby sanctuary, had traveled all the way to a suburban home just to find the girl who had cared for him when he was a baby. Wildlife experts and animal behaviorists were stunned by what they saw in the footage. They couldn't believe how calm Batu had been around Lila, how he seemed to recognize her instantly, even after all those years. It was unprecedented. Gorillas are highly intelligent, but for one to make such a journey and show that level of affection was something rarely seen. In interviews, Lila tried to explain it, though words didn't seem enough. "He's not just an animal to me," she said in a local news interview. "He's family, and I guess family doesn't forget." It wasn't long before the local authorities, along with animal control, managed to safely return Batu to the nearby sanctuary where he had come from. Though Lila wasn't able to bring him home, she found comfort in knowing he would be safe. His return made headlines in animal conservation communities. with experts pointing out how this rare case of recognition could help future efforts to improve animal rehabilitation and sanctuary care. The media frenzy brought attention to the importance of gorilla conservation. Many organizations took the opportunity to raise awareness about the dangers facing gorillas in the wild, especially in places like the Congo Basin, where habitat loss and poaching are rampant. The story of Batu and Lila became a symbol of hope, a reminder that the bond between humans and animals is far stronger than many realize. Lila herself was approached by wildlife conservation groups, asking her to join campaigns, make appearances, and help raise awareness about the struggles gorillas face. But despite all the attention, Lila remained humble. She didn't want to be the center of the story. For her, the real message was the bond she shared with Batu, and the understanding that love, no matter how wild, could transcend boundaries. It wasn't long before Lila was invited to share her story at wildlife conferences, her video going viral as an example of the deep, often underestimated connections that can form between humans and the creatures they care for. In every interview, Lila spoke passionately about how important it is to protect endangered species and how every effort counts, no matter how small. Even though Batu was no longer with her, the impact of their bond rippled across the world. Their story reminded people that there's so much more to wild animals than we often see. Each one is a unique individual with its own emotions and memories, capable of forming connections that last a lifetime. Lila's life was forever changed by that one moment, by the gorilla who remembered her. And as the story continued to be shared worldwide, more and more people learned about the special relationship between humans and animals, and the need to protect the wild spaces where these creatures belong. As the dust settled from the chaos of the gorilla's unexpected visit, Lila reflected on the profound experience that had turned her life upside down. She knew the world had witnessed something extraordinary, but to her, it was just the reality of the deep connection she'd shared with Batu. A connection that not only defied the odds, but showed the world just how much love and empathy we can have for animals, and how they can return that love. In the days following the event, Lila received countless messages from people all over the world, expressing their admiration for her bond with Batu. Many had never considered that animals, especially wild ones like gorillas, might form relationships as deep as the ones we have with other people. Lila's story was a reminder that empathy, kindness, and understanding are universal, no matter the species. Her story also raised important questions about wildlife conservation. The bond she had with Batu became a symbol for the struggles of endangered species everywhere, especially gorillas. Lila, now more passionate than ever, was eager to use her newfound platform to advocate for their protection. In interviews and talks, she emphasized how important it was to preserve not just the animals, but their habitats as well. Gorillas and so many other animals are facing extinction, she said, and it's up to us to ensure that they have a safe place to live. As the months passed, Lila's involvement in wildlife causes grew. She traveled to conferences, worked with conservation organizations, and even helped raise funds for gorilla sanctuaries. But despite all the attention, Lila never lost sight of the simple truth that had brought her to this moment. She loved Batu, and their bond was something no amount of media coverage could ever take away. And though Batu was now safe at the sanctuary, Lila continued to visit him whenever she could, knowing that, while they couldn't be together all the time, their connection would never fade. Lila's story, and Batu's unforgettable visit, changed the way people viewed wild animals and the relationships humans can form with them. But for Lila, the message was clear. It's up to us to protect the creatures with whom we share this planet, to cherish the deep emotional connections they can form, and to remember that even the wildest animals are capable of love. In the end, their story wasn't just about a girl and a gorilla. It was about the power of compassion and the reminder that every effort counts in the fight to protect the world's endangered creatures. Through their bond, Lila and Batu had shown the world that love knows no boundaries, and it's a lesson that would continue to inspire generations to come.